Good evening and warm welcome to the Friday talk. Today the topic is being free from past hurts. It's quite interesting and deep topic to explore. And for this we have Samantha Fraser. Samantha is a student and practitioner of Raja Yoga meditation for over 25 years. And now she's based at Global Retreat Center in Oxford. From my own observation and connection with Samantha, she's positive-minded, and her words always bring a lot of clarity and are quite profound. So welcome, Samantha.
Thank you, Paulina.
Over to you.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody, and Dom Shanti, which simply means a greeting of peace, for those of you who are hearing that for the first time. And so being free from past hurts is a very interesting topic, because I think it's something that all of us are experiencing even now or have experienced, and of course, some deeper than others. And so in today's session, I wanted to explore what is behind the hurt, because I think to be free from past hurts, we need to have some level of understanding about the root of it, but also how we, in a way, sustain those past hurts. And so exploring the depth of the root of past hurts and the effect that they have in our relationships. And I think, speaking personally, and maybe for all of you, most of my hurts, I think, have been caused through relationships. And I think the relationships that we have with others as a child is where we begin to experience some kind of emotional pain. And if you trace back any feelings of discomfort that you have now, it's often, I feel, connected to what happened in our childhood. And so often, young people, children, at that time, we all saw ourselves through the eyes of the adults. First our parents, then our teachers. Of course, as adults, you have the media sending all kinds of images. And we try to live up to those expectations of those adults as a child. And of course, most of us, I feel, would have failed quite significantly, because we know it's impossible to live up to those expectations. And so what happened then, I feel, as children, for some of us anyway, it's like we saw ourselves through the eyes of those adults, and those impressions became our belief systems about ourselves. And it's like we created a prison for ourselves based on the perceptions that others had of us or the labels that they gave us. And so any kind of trauma that we have as a young person, even if it's a slight thing, as a child, you can't process it. And so what happens, it's buried. And as we grow through our teenage years and adult years, it just keeps getting triggered, right? And somebody will say something, and then we find ourselves reacting. But the reason for that, I feel, is some kind of unresolved need or some buried experience that we haven't been able to process. We didn't have the vocabulary maybe as a child. We didn't have the understanding. And so I think it's important that we recognize that aspect of it. And I think one of the things as adults, as we go through lives and when we go through our lives and that hurt gets triggered, it's often through things like when we feel we've been insulted, or we feel that we've been betrayed, all of these strong emotions. And that just simply adds to the hurt. And at that time, I feel we're trying to find some kind of comfort in our relationships. But it's not always easy because of the triggers that keep coming up in the relationships. They touch a sore point, and I'm not understanding why I'm reacting, and it's so buried that we can't even see it. And so one of the things I feel that happens in our relationships, and the things that we can never forget, is the way that others make us feel. Whether it's positive, I think we all remember the people in our lives who inspired us and who were there for us at the right time. But also we don't forget those individuals also that made us feel a sense of shame or guilt, whatever it might be. So it's like we carry these feelings through our lives, and in our relationships, they just get thrown about. It's almost like a tennis match, if you like. But there's a lovely saying that I heard the other day. I can't remember who shared it, but the saying was something like this, that you may not be able to forgive and forget, but you can start to heal. And I think that's a very powerful statement, because I often hear that people say, I can't forget. It's hard to forgive because this is what happened. And it was a very challenging, tragic experience for that individual. But one thing we can all do is we can choose to heal. And maybe through the healing process, we might get to a place where we're able to forgive, maybe not forget, but to forgive and understand to a certain extent. And so, of course, I can only heal when there's the support around me, whatever that might look like. So I wanted to share a video actually that really illustrates, and you may have seen it. It's called Step Inside the Circle. It's been around for 2 years, but I thought this clip, it's a 2-minute clip, was really apt for this topic, because what you're going to see is what can happen to an adult when in their childhood they have been rejected, they have been abused in some way. And so anyway, I'm going to ask Paulina to share that video, and then we'll come back.
It's time now, everyone. We're gonna do the compassion trauma circle. Is everyone ready to face their past with compassion? Is that a yes? Yes! While you were growing up, during your first 18 years of life, if a parent or other adult in the household often or very often would swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. If you often felt that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, step inside the circle. If your family lived in extreme poverty, step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle.
There is no shame. There is no shame.
You guys know.
Thank you, Polina. I'm sure some of you, if not most of you, have seen that clip before, but I wanted to share it again this evening because I think it's a very powerful clip. And later on in that video, that was just a 2-minute clip, what they share is the fact that they didn't know that their friends and the other inmates had actually experienced the things that they had experienced. So part of their healing was just recognizing that they were not alone. And I think that's a very important part of being able to be free from past hurts. Sometimes it can feel as if it's just me or it's just you, and I'm alone in whatever experience I'm experiencing. But when I begin to recognize that, in fact, I'm not alone. If I'm on a bus or a train, perhaps the majority of those people that I don't know are probably experiencing some level of emotional discomfort, like myself. And so one of the things I think we do when we are in a place of hurt, I don't think it's conscious. It can be for some people. But I think what we try to do is that we use our past hurts to, in a way, justify our behavior, our outbursts, our outrage. And, I might say, but you don't know what's happened in my life. And, I just can't help it. And when that happens, in a way, I don't think it's conscious, but in a way, it's a form of control where, because the hurt is so buried and so deep, I'm not even aware of it. But we can use that to gain some level of control in a world internally where there is none, right? So it's like we're trying to control the external. And when that happens, of course, it's very hard to begin to take responsibility for my own feelings. And what happens then is that I add to the hurt because, first of all, I'm in denial. It's not me, it's you. Second, I keep projecting, I keep blaming, or I keep avoiding. And one of the things I've realized, I've learned for myself, is that when you begin to face or look at or take responsibility for the feelings, even the most difficult feelings that we're having, I feel it's like I open the door to begin to move out of that hurt. It's not a conscious thing because nobody wants to feel any kind of pain. And so in a way, it's a protective mechanism where I project it outwards or I blame others. And the way that it manifests often when we are feeling hurt, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, is that when we resist any kind of change or suggestion, or we're very stubborn, or there's fear. And all of these are just different faces of anger. And we all know that anger is not a primary emotion, it's a secondary emotion. And it's some unmet need that I haven't been able to meet for myself, first of all, that then produces this kind of behavior of resistance or fear. And so how to be free of past hurts? What are the steps? Because one of the things that happens is that when I'm in a place of hurt, I'm completely oblivious to the impact that it has on others. And in fact, we can almost, as I said earlier, we can justify it. But what happens in that scenario then is that there's so many waste thoughts, people are having so many thoughts about me because I'm causing that level of discomfort for others, that's actually not going to help me to be free of any kind of hurt, because I'm creating an atmosphere around me where people are perhaps scared, or they feel uncomfortable, or they don't feel safe in that company. And so in fact, I'm making my situation for myself even worse. And of course, all of this can be happening consciously, but most of the time it's not, because the hurt is buried. But but to begin to become aware of the impact in my often close relationships. It's quite sad how often the people we love the most become the scapegoat for our feelings, our past hurts. And I remember when I was studying in Liverpool at the university, and the first year I was in halls of residence. The second year, you share with friends that you meet in that first year. We must have been about 4 of us in the same house. And there was one particular individual who, for some reason, kept comparing herself to all of us and didn't feel that she was the same and good enough, all of those things. But what she ended up doing actually is, in a way, controlling the whole household, because we were so scared to leave the house. Could you say, oh, I might kill myself? And she make all of these dramatic statements that we were literally tiptoeing around her and scared to leave her on her own. And I don't think she was conscious of it, but that was the level of her hurt. That was the level of her hurt, that she wanted to exhibit some kind of control, but didn't have any control over her own emotions. And so I really feel that the first step really is really beginning to create space. Because one of the things that I've observed in myself, when I'm in that place of feeling a lot of hurt or sadness or sorrow, I get busy, avoidance. I get very busy because I don't want to look at it. I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. And yet if I don't go there, it's going to persist. And it may get buried for a while, and then it'll get triggered again. And so the first thing is to create space. And what I mean by that is just creating an internal space. It might even be a physical space if you're living in a place that is quite, cluttered. But it's an internal space where I give myself space just to be with me. And it might be that I take a walk in nature. It might be that I meditate, I do some kind of mindfulness practice. But it's very, very important to begin to create that level of space. Because when I do that, I'm able to tune in with myself and with the other individual where there may be a clash. And it's when I create that space inside that I can truly listen to my inner world of thoughts and feelings. And at the same time, then truly listen to the other. And recently I was in a very difficult conversation. And in this conversation, I was being challenged or criticized for the things that I wasn't doing. That was the perception, right? But it was interesting because normally I could be quite defensive. But I just listened and I just responded, okay, I can see where you're coming from. Or, okay, that might be your perception. I don't quite see it like that. But I really felt within myself there was a level of detachment, perhaps, and a level of calmness. And that's I was quite surprised because it was quite a difficult conversation. And what happened, because I didn't defend, react, the conversation then reached another level where that individual began to take ownership for her own or his own emotional situation. And that person said, what I've just said is really perhaps not that meaningful, because really the situation is that I'm not looking after myself. I'm not taking care of myself. And it was the first time that I had that experience where a conversation that was very critical, quite negative, then went to this place of complete honesty. It was a place of trust, right? And I was able to share my own feelings and my own emotions. And it was a place where I feel two souls, if you like, met for that moment. And there was just a very honest and quite a vulnerable conversation. And I think that's what it's about, creating space where I can, first of all, stop all the noise, stop all the busyness, and just tune into myself, but also the other person. And because that was a very powerful experience for me, I know that in the next difficult conversation, you never know, but I feel that's what will happen. I will be able to just be present, because we all have our impressions and perceptions of each other. And if you live with anyone in families, then you know each other so well, and there is a level of expectation. And so to be able to just hold the space for the hurt, because that's what it is, all the criticism, all the shouting that can happen in relationships, what really is the issue? It's got nothing to do with what the topic is about. Most of the time, it's not about you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It's often about some kind of, as I said before, some kind of need that I have, and I'm expecting another human being to fulfill that for me. And so giving yourself space. And for me, it's been my practice of meditation that has allowed me to really undo all the impressions that I must have taken on board as a child. And because I have a belief in reincarnation, even before this birth, if you like. So imagine how much is accumulated within the soul. But for me, being able to experience myself in a completely unique way, a self before the hurt, a self before I had the layers of hurt through those relationships. And that's powerful, because then I have another reality. Up until I started to meditate, which was 20 odd years ago, I mean, my life was, I was 20 something and enjoying the world and, doing my thing. But my sense of self was very much based on these external realities, if you like, of my community, my parents from the Caribbean. My professional world was that of a teacher. And so you tend to have many different identities, right? And with all of those different labels and identities comes a whole list of expectations. And when you feel you haven't met them, you can feel that you failed. And this sense of failure causes a feeling of shame. And in that video, they had to say very loudly, there is no shame. Because as a child, who was there to defend them, really? And so when you're able to experience a self before the hurt on a feeling level, then you can begin to say, I have a choice in the way that I feel. I can choose the way that I feel. And for me, this aspect of just seeing myself as a spiritual being, call it a soul, call it a being of qualities, without any external stimulus, I'm able to feel a certain degree of love and peace that wasn't dependent on anything external. And so what happens then is that you find another level of strength inside to begin to work yourself through the hurt. But I really think the first and most important thing is giving myself space to understand where the hurt has come from in the first place. because we tend to see it just on a very surface level. It's because of what you said, what you did, what you didn't do. But that space is important, and meditation for me is a way of creating that space where I can begin to literally see myself as I really am. And to facilitate that for me has been having a connection with the divine. Because in that connection, you're able to experience a quality of love that is completely unconditional. And we don't learn unconditional love, you know. The love that we learn is very, very conditional from our parents, and then of course from other adults as a child. And so we learn that we have to do something, and then, you know, I'll get the hug or the love or whatever it is. And so in this connection, seeing myself as more than just what other people have told me, actually, and then experiencing this connection with the divine, then I can begin to rebuild a solid foundation for myself, and also begin to really, really let go. I think it's more than just forgiving and forgetting, but it's about letting go so that I'm able to keep moving forward. It's about finding the key to the prison that as a child others helped to create, but as an adult I continue to sustain it. And so, yeah, letting go and allowing myself to be free from the impressions that have been created over time. And a lot of it is of course within my own mind, where the memories of whatever's happened in my story keep emerging. And for some of us, it may be quite traumatic, and it's not just a question of being able to let go of that, because it's very deep. And for some people, it's created many, many scars. But I think it's one step at a time where I choose a new reality for myself. And I think when we just make that decision to choose something that's going to make me feel peaceful, stable, I think the universe collaborates and helps us to move forward in that. You know, when I was in Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, we had like it was the days of these little shops, you know, sort of meditation spaces. And we called it Inner Space. Maybe it was, back in the 90s, right? And so it was in a place called Soper's Arcade. It's the main sort of arcade in Victoria Falls, extremely touristy. So we had a little sort of shop, and then we had a little kind of curtain, and behind people could meditate. So this guy comes in, he goes, didn't say hello, just went, 10 years ago, I would never have come in a place like this. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he said, 10 years ago, I was in a very, very different place. And he reached what he said, rock bottom. And he didn't like himself. He didn't like the space that he'd reached. And he stopped everything. He stopped drinking, he gave a whole list of things that he stopped. And he created space for himself. And he began to look at how he had lived his life, the way that he'd lived it, and why he'd lived that life, the way that he'd lived it. And that's where his search for himself, I think, started. And he must have been, I don't know, maybe 40, maybe that age, 45. And they say, there's a beautiful saying, is that when you reach the depths of sadness, the doors of joy open. I heard that the other day as well. Don't know if you've heard that saying. And it's, in a way, I think there's a default mechanism within all of us that we get to a point, and it may take even years, where we say, enough is enough. I've got to do something. I want to be free of these feelings, as this person did. And then it's like just taking one step at a time back to myself. And that takes courage, actually. It takes courage to be able to look in the mirror and say, I need to do something. It takes courage to even take responsibility for my feelings as an adult. As a child, I had no option. I had no option. But as an adult, I have an option. I think that's the responsibility, and it takes a huge amount of courage too. And it also takes a couple of powers to be able to move in that direction. And the first power is the power to tolerate. And people often say, how can you tolerate this? I shouldn't have to tolerate this. And I think our understanding of tolerance has been compromised or tainted by how it's perceived in the world, because tolerance is really a great power, and it comes from, I feel, this aspect of unconditional love. It doesn't mean suppressing, but it means to be able to hold a space so that you're able to process or understand. And so being able to tolerate even my own feelings, no matter how bad I might feel, not to go for the route of distraction or avoidance or projection or blame, but to be able to sit with that feeling and say, okay, I'm feeling like this right now, not quite sure why, but this is my reality, just that much. And as soon as we acknowledge and we're able to name the feeling, actually, I feel, from my own personal experience, that 50% of the work is done, where just taking ownership for the feeling allows me to move through it and allows me to begin the process of letting go of it. And so not just tolerate, and when I'm able to tolerate my own feelings, then I'm able to also hold the space, if you like, for the feelings of others, as I shared in that conversation. And I felt I wasn't consciously feeling I was holding the space, but I was listening to all the things that was wrong with me, actually. In a way, it was interesting just I was listening, but I was kind of observing the whole scene. I was quite detached. And then, of course, as I shared, being able to reach that level of authenticity in the conversation. But one is the power to tolerate, but the other one is the power to accommodate. And it's, for me, that I always like this question is, how big is my heart? It's very easy to accommodate people that are like you, that praise you, that love you, It's much harder to accommodate somebody or let somebody into your space when they're very negative or critical or whatever, or they defame you. And I think that is the proof of some kind of internal power, if you like, that we all have, actually. But it's difficult to feel that when you're in a space of hurt, as we all are. We can kind of go in and out of that space. But I feel it's recognizing that we have the tools inside to begin to feel good about ourselves. Maybe it's just that, to be able to feel good about myself regardless. I still have my stuff and my weaknesses and all of these things, but still I can feel good about myself. And if I don't, then if I'm rejecting any kind of feeling or denying, it's like I'm really rejecting myself, actually. And part of being free of past hurts is about embracing our whole story, even from, whatever's happened in our childhood to the present day, because somehow it's all shaped me. But at any moment, we can begin to introduce change just by the way we choose to use our minds, and where we make a decision to not be in a place of bondage where I feel that I'm contained by all these impressions, but I choose to step inside, maybe not the circle, but I choose to step inside of myself. And I don't think this journey we can do on our own, this whole journey of being free from past hurts. And if you believe in reincarnation as I do, we're not just talking about this birth of Samantha, we're talking about hurts that I don't even remember from other lifetimes, right? So all of that is contained within this individual, within the soul. And so there's a lot to process. So there's no way that I can do that without some kind of intervention. And so just being able to journey inside and begin to cultivate a relationship with myself, but then of course, with this higher being, with the divine. And it's still a journey for me, for many of us, I think. But I can't just say, oh yeah, nothing's happened and I'm free of past hurts. I need an injection. And that injection comes from this connection with the Supreme Soul or with the divine. And it's not that, for me in meditation, that the connection with the Supreme Soul or the divine is the destination. I go, wow, I've had this amazing experience. Wow, I saw something, I had a vision, whatever it might be. It's not that. But what it is the power I get from that connection, the silence in meditation, the peace in meditation, that then becomes the power for me, for all of us to have the courage actually to go inside and look at, start moving all of those emotions around so that we can begin to be free of them. I think we've buried them because it's just easier. I mean, we didn't have the capacity even to begin to explore all of that. And unless you have some kind of method, whether it's some people are in therapy, some people have their faith, their religion, whatever it might be, unless you have some kind of mechanism, I wouldn't advise anybody to go there. It's too horrible, perhaps for some people. But I think for me, meditation has been a very gentle process where I'm holding the reins and I'm doing as much as I can at any given moment. And I'm working on seeing my own truth, which means letting go of all of these hurts, a step at a time, a step at a time. And so, it's really recognizing that we have a huge amount of capacity inside. The only way that I was able to see that was when I developed this connection with the divine. And it was like a mirror. And I feel sometimes in meditation, not literally hearing a voice, but it's like I feel that what I'm hearing or feeling is that, see what I see, let go of your limited vision of yourself, let go of all the opinions that you've taken on board from others, be it your parents, be it your in-laws, be it whoever. That is not you, right? That's what I feel the experiences in meditation. It's urging me to step out of that, step out of the circle of all of those opinions and just be very quiet, very still. And ask yourself, what am I feeling now? For just a few minutes, I'm not the name. I'm not the role of the mother. And of course, you are the parents, but for that moment, I'm just me, right? Before any of those labels became a reality. And in that space of silence, I feel it's like a flame is lit, right, within myself. And that flame that's lit within myself enables me to see not just myself, but others. Enables me to see that they're probably hurting as much as I'm hurting, and therefore that's why the clash is there. Rather than thinking it's some kind of conspiracy to make you look bad or to trip you up. I don't think so. I don't think so. And if we can begin to meet each other with that vision, then in a way, that commonality that really we're going through, or we've had very similar experiences, not the same, but similar. I think that's where we begin to create bridges with each other, but also we're able to begin to let go of the things that have created a very deep impression within myself, within all of you. And I think, as I said before, back in my earlier days as a child, and not to blame anyone really, it happened. And to be able to forgive myself for not being able to understand it at that time. I was a child. But as an adult, to give myself the gift of understanding and meeting myself as I truly am. And I think that's the journey, really, to begin to build a reality of ourselves that becomes a mirror for others, really. And then you can begin to create a different kind of world, first of all, within your own mind, but also, secondly, within your own homes. We're not talking about the whole world here. We're talking about the people we live with. And often the people you live with are the people that trigger you, right? They can push that button there exactly to say that, and you will go, you will explode maybe. But I always remember, this is my mantra, when I feel some kind of reaction or I feel sad or upset, I say, Sam, that's the trigger, but it's not the cause. Find the cause. If you don't find the cause, you're going to keep projecting and blaming and spoiling relationships. And sometimes I can't find the cause. I don't know, but I just know that that was a trigger, what they said, how they said it. Touch that pain, that hurt that was developed, God knows when. So let me explore that. And so for me, when I know, when I'm in that place of feeling emotional or hurt, this is what I say to myself. One is, it's the trigger, it's not the cause, but two is, what do I need? What am I trying to take in this situation? Am I trying to avoid something within myself? Am I trying to avoid my own pain, my own hurt? And often the answer is yes. So the more I'm expecting somebody to put a plaster or to bandage my own wound, right? Which is often the case, subtly. It's not conscious, I don't think. Speaking for myself. The more I will constantly keep rejecting, the more I will constantly keep wanting somebody else to do something for me. And even if it's the closest relationship, maybe they just can't. Maybe I've told them 10, 20 times, be it my daughter, my son, my husband, my wife, please, when you do this, it does that. I really can't manage. I've told them. But we just don't know each other's story. Even if we've lived with them for decades, I always think there's a part of ourselves that we keep hidden from each other, not consciously often, maybe consciously, because it's that part, that's where the trauma sits, however small. And even I haven't gone there, even I don't know what that is. So how can I really expect somebody else to to hold the space for me at times when they haven't even gone to their own trauma. And so I really feel it's a time, I feel where everything's coming out, right? Whatever you've buried, I know the time is such that whatever you're trying to hide or disguise, it's just coming out, you know, it's just being thrown around the room. People are reacting and you go, God, that doesn't feel like me. I'm not like that. And I've been saying that to myself. I don't normally do that. But these are things that I haven't realized about myself. But the beauty of the story is, I feel, is that we're not alone in the journey. That if I can begin to cultivate a connection with the source, with the divine, then that doesn't just help me, but it helps all the relationships that I'm trying to manage. So I just want to leave you with one quote before we have questions. I think this was from Daddy Janki. Daddy Janki has passed away now, but she was a huge inspiration for many of us who are part of the Brahma Kumaris. And actually not just that, for many other people. Took a lot of inspiration for her. So I think this is what she said. I'm sure that person said it was her, but I like this line, and it says, no one is as good as you think they are, and no one is as bad as you think they are. So in other words, don't get impressed. Don't be so quick to judge. Just create space, tune in. Okay, let me stop there because I can see questions flashing on the screen. And I'll ask Paulina to take the questions up.
Yes, so we have one question, and earlier you said about that I accept the feeling of hurt. When I accept the hurt, and what's the process after that, and what to do?
Yeah, I think, you know, when I accept that I'm feeling abandoned or whatever it might be, I think what happens then, it's like the process emerges. I feel, for me, what I've experienced is that I remember being in a meeting maybe a year ago or something, and something was said in the meeting, and it was directed directly at me, and I felt extreme sorrow. I can't tell you. I felt that the trust I had for that group just got broken in a second. And but what I did, I said, they're the trigger, not the cause. And I was in this space of not knowing what the cause of this feeling was for about a good 5 or 6 days. But because I owned it, I felt I was held by, let's say, the universe. So I didn't have a process automatically. What happened was that I was having conversations that were somehow helping me. It wasn't that I looked for a particular person to tell, but I was hearing things just organically, if you like. That was, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's kind of what I went through. And I just felt the process in a way started itself because I just said, this is what I'm feeling. And then the funny thing is that the person that had said what she said called me. This might have been 2 weeks later. She was oblivious to how I was feeling. And I said to her, you know, when you said that, I was really quite upset and I was in a good space by then. And she started to cry. I would never hurt you. And so to answer your question, I think the biggest step is just to take responsibility for our feelings. And then you'll find automatically, this is my experience, that the process then unfolds itself. And you find that you get cooperation from different people. It's just a book just appears, and that's exactly what I need to read, or the universe will provide a way for me, as it did in that instance, to communicate and to share. And she was she had no idea I was going through this sorrow for 2 weeks at all. And she'd say, I'd never do anything to hurt you, Samantha. And so maybe it was my misconception, but yeah, I think it's not like step 1, step 2. The biggest thing is just to be able to sincerely say, okay, I'm feeling this. They may have triggered it. They may have done or said something, but yeah, this is what I'm feeling. Not quite sure what to do about it right now, but I'm holding it. And the process then reveals itself.
So another question similar to that is, if I have hurt someone in the past unknowingly, how does one try to resolve that? And I was told that happened. I apologize and I tried to move further.
Yeah. You know, I always feel we need to do something much more subtle. I think words are powerful, but I think where we have caused hurt for someone, and of course we've added to their own hurt, they're already carrying a lot of hurt. So for me to go and say, I'm sorry, is a big step, but their pain is so deep that that's not going to even scratch the surface. So I feel what's really important is just my own internal feelings. I'm not saying this for the person who asked the question, but sometimes, you know, I can want to apologize because I want to feel good about myself. Makes sense. So the intention is not always because I've hurt them, but because I feel bad and I want to feel better. I'm not saying it's in your case. I think it was Daksha. And so this process of having really good feelings and good wishes for anyone that I've hurt or who has hurt me, where I'm not trying to make myself feel good, not even 1%, but just having these good feelings and good wishes for that individual. And you might say, well, how do you do that? And it might just be just holding very good feelings, thoughts of peace or love in my mind. And it's not that I'm specifically trying to send it to that person, but just paying attention to my own internal stage, that I don't cause any sorrow to another individual. Of course we do, but paying that kind of attention. So just good feelings, good wishes, and not even expecting anything from that individual. I think when we stop taking, I think automatically I'm giving through my good feelings and good wishes.
How to address the buttons in a short term for long term?
How to what, sorry?
How to address the buttons in a short term and for long term? Maybe
the buttons. Is it the button? Oh, you mean when my buttons are pressed? No.
That's the question. If yes.
Yeah.
The triggers.
Exactly, Manoj, the triggers, yeah. I think part of the button pressing happens because there's a part of myself I haven't understood. And so I'm surprised again when I react in a certain way because I haven't understood myself fully. I haven't understood perhaps my own hurt, my own weaknesses to a certain extent. And the more I get to understand myself, and that's why relationships are great, because they give me an insight to myself that I hadn't seen before I entered that relationship. And so I don't think it's about being sort of heavy about it, but just really using each relationship, not using, that's the wrong word, but appreciating the relationships in terms of what they reveal about myself. And then the more I understand myself and let go of the things that cause disruption or discomfort in relationships, the more I can be in a space of giving. And so use any trigger moment to say, God, what was that? Oh, and not just like ego or anger, but, you know, kind of unpack it a bit more, or it might just be, wow, that was a lot of kindness, Sam, you showed there. It's not just about seeing the negative triggers, but also to see the positive, because there are people that bring out the best in you. And so own that. There's also situations that bring out the not so positive side as well. And so use it to accumulate information about yourself. The more you know about yourself, the more you can stop projecting and just own your stuff, really. That's my experience.
I have had a traumatic experience as a child and still have difficulties, as I lost one of my parents and I was lost for a long time. How do I find myself and forgive myself?
It's a journey. I say that because I also lost my father last year. And it's the first time I lost anybody close to me, actually, that close. And I think I'm still on the journey. I'm not going to give you a quick remedy and some magic potion. No, I think it's just one step at a time, 1 year at a time. It's been a year for me. But I think it's more challenging when that parent was a support. I mean, it's not that I saw my dad every day and all of that, but you were a child when you lost that parent. So, yeah, and I think the child would recognize a stable support, you know, a child would recognize, even if not consciously, but knows who it can trust and who's the backbone for it, for him or her. And so if I've lost a parent who was that significant in my life as a child, then it's a process of really regaining the trust within myself and recognizing that I also have the inner capacity to be able to trust myself, to forgive myself, but also to take support from the Supreme or the Divine, because whatever relations we have in a human capacity, my experience, I know many of you may not be meditating, but my own experience is that I can develop that relationship. Yeah, I couldn't be, I can have that relationship with the divine, with the Supreme Soul, whether it's a mother, a father, whatever it is. In meditation, that source can fulfill that responsibility, that need for me. Somebody just said, it is the trauma that blocks one, but it's just about finding a small opening and creating space, as I said, as much space as I can. And of course, if it's from my childhood, it's a deep process. But just, even if I feel nothing's happening, I'm sitting, I'm doing this practice, nothing's happening, keep doing it, because what you're doing is you're creating space that's going to work for you at the right time. But if we don't see immediate results, we tend to just stop and say, it's not working. And of course, the trauma takes over. But just to be even if it's a 5-minute thing, a 5-minute space, 2-minute space, create the practice so it becomes a habit. Because in that space that you're going to find the first step out of that for yourself. I just saw a question pop up very quickly, Pauline, about parents not being emotionally available and then rejecting. What was that question? Sorry, I know the time's going. There was a question about feeling rejected or something by Tracy.
Yes, I felt rejected and I began to reject myself. Now I recognize this and recognize I reject others to avoid being hurt.
Yeah, thank you.
How do I learn to trust myself and others again?
Yeah, that's, I mean, if you've experienced that as a child, it really means that our level of self-respect is probably not very much if you've experienced rejection from the others that should have loved you the most. But again, I feel I'm not quite sure who the person is exactly, but again, I feel without some kind of practice of meditation, without this connection with the source, I don't feel it's possible to come out of that feeling of despair and rejection, because in that connection, I feel the love that perhaps I didn't feel from, the adults around me. And so it's building a connection with the source, with the divine, that allows me to begin to love myself again, and it's not instant. It's a journey, because if you've had years of rejecting yourself or despising yourself based on what adults told you as a child, then that's huge. And I think not even a human being can change that, because even it can be your closest relationship, which is positive for you, but because that trauma is there, it's like a part of you can't give wholly to that relationship. But in the relationship with the divine, you don't have to do anything, just create space. And that source knows your story and knows the level of your pain and trauma in a feeling capacity. And so all I have to do is create space to receive that power and that love and that light, so that I can begin to work through this story of myself, not story, but this experience of feeling rejected. And so I would really encourage many of you may be meditating, but just increase the quality of that practice.
I know time is up. One last, and you can be very short, and then you can guide us on a meditation, how to help a friend who is going through feelings of guilt, and because they made the same mistake again and again, and they cannot snap out of it. And after that, you can
stop, meditate.
meditate.
It's interesting when you have friends who you really want to help, and you can see the pattern, but they can't see the pattern for themselves. And I think the best thing really is to just be present and just to listen. And I mean really listen, because I know that with a friend of mine who was always choosing relationships where she would be beaten by these partners of hers, I would like go, for God's sake. And so I was very much involved in her situation, and I was very much trying to give the answers. But we know that the answers can only come from ourselves. And so what I've learned to do is just to be present and just to listen. And when I'm asked, what do you think? What would you do? Then I share it. But in the past, I've just like laid down the law and said, come on, because they're my friends. I want to help them. But I almost felt, if I look back and I'm honest, it was almost my need to want to help them and for them to respond to that, as opposed to being available for where they were at. And I think if we can all learn to be available for where people are in their hurt and pain, that is a huge service. Just listen, and they'll have the space to hear themselves, not be affected by your thoughts of they should be doing that. They'll have the space to hear themselves, and then eventually take your guidance and support when they are ready. But I know I used to want to fix it quickly, and they were just not ready. So anyway, I'm aware of time, and perhaps now we can just have a short meditation, and then I know Polina will give some announcements. So I don't think we'll have any music. We'll just have a few thoughts really, and it's going to be maybe a summary of this session. So just sitting comfortably now and just relaxing completely. And just taking a moment to reflect on what you've heard in the last hour or so. And just ask yourself, what is it that I need to do now? What can I do to begin to just take one step forward? And to remember that in each step that we take in the direction of our own truth, we always have the company of the divine or that higher source. Just one step of courage, and I'm able to experience love, actually, stability, peace from that source. And to deepen that experience, when I create a subtle space inside myself where I can go just to be still, just to be quiet, then I'm able to invite the divine into that space. And that's where I'm able to take real support. I'm able to find my own inner power to be able to trust, heal, and love again. Love myself first, and then be able to share that love with others. And the first step is just to create space. Space is through the day of silence, where I can go inside, connect to myself as I really am, then invite the divine into that space. And in that space, I'm able to experience oceans of peace, oceans of love, and just experience a deeper connection with myself and with the source. And in doing so, I'm able to create a new reality, the real reality about myself and about others. Om Shanti. Om Shanti means I am a being of peace. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Samantha. I like the way you explain in depth, yet simply. And I will keep the point you made at the beginning that we have a choice, and to see myself in a different perspective beyond the roles and labels, more spiritual. So thanks a lot. And I have some great news to share with you. Leicester is now open for the in-house activities from June onwards, and you are all welcome to join every Friday. And this is the slide. And next week, the talk is Motivation Matters, and this is online talk from Harrow. And we will have live activities, in-house activities from 10th of June. Thanks for joining us today.